for me, one of my quotes that I put across with athletes is that you need to train your mind the way you train your body. It is the specificity of the process and understanding what is my process that's actually working for me. This identification is then going to lead me to focusing on that process. I want to play without pressure is a utopian thought that can never happen. First, being aware of the mind, aware of his challenges, aware of what are the things that is already doing well, and then what are the things that we need to add to it to improve his pressure controlling strategies. So that addition might be a visualization strategy, it might be a self-talk strategy, it might be a focusing on process kind of a strategy, it might be breathing, and it is what you can do when you're being uncomfortable is what is finally going to differentiate between good and great.
Cricket Life Stories with me, Neel Khagram. Today, we're joined by Dr. Swaroop Savanur. How's it going out in India?
It's going well, Neel. Thanks for having me here. And it's a great channel that you have. I look forward to talking a lot about mindset, but it's great over here in Pune. It's starting to get cold. And then if you can see this pullover that I've got.
No, I appreciate your time. So you are a mental conditioning coach in the field of cricket. You've worked at the highest level. You still are working at the highest level. Worked at the latest IPL, which we'll get onto. But do you want to give us a brief background on your career before we dive into the specifics of the chats?
Sure, Neel. I started this journey when sports psychology was not even a term. At least not in India. I started journey about 17, 18 years back. When at that time, if there was one body part missing in Indians, it was guts. And I think so in the early 1990s, 2000s, Indians were not supposed to have that killer instinct and, not able to manage pressure well. And we are in that era, and maybe I was in the 20s that time. And I wanted to do something in sports. I was a sportsman, and there was an article that came in the newspaper by the chief of army staff that time, and he said that if we can't win at sports, we can't win wars. And it struck me so highly, and I thought that wow, this is my calling. And it was in the papers, and I cut that, and it's now there in my office after 20 years as an inspirational resource for me. But from them, that was the point I decided, yeah, this is what I need to do. And I was a doctor by profession. I transitioned from being a master's in orthodontics to getting into brain science. They say that you take your life to the next level. So I went from dental to mental. And from there, finally, I've come to a place where slowly over a period of time, as players and parents and coaches recognize this area, I'm now the last 10 years completely into this profession and working at the highest level, thankfully.
Yeah, do you want to just go into the specifics, the teams you worked for in cricket?
Yes, so I was the mental coach for the Vidarbha Ranji team. Ranji, as you know, is the first Division 1 team, and had some great players like Faiz Fazal, Umesh Yadav, who were at that time part of the Vidarbha team. And I worked with their Ranji team for 3 years. Along with that, I worked with the under 16, under 19, 23 and women's team. And it was a great journey to work with so many different age groups and, working on their mindsets and knowing the differences on how to work with different age groups, different thought processes, socio-economic backgrounds, personalities. Then in cricket, I also worked with the National Cricket Academy, BCCI's National Cricket Academy at Bengaluru. And I had the opportunity to work with some of the greats of the game over there, including Rahul Bhai and then Narendra Hirvani and so many others. And now this year I'm associated with the Punjab Kings IPL team. So this is what my journey has been in cricket, apart from other sports which I work.
It's been a fantastic journey so far. You've also got a professional resource. Do you want to give it a little plug? We'll put all the links in the description below. But whoever wants to get a bit deeper from you after this chat, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of national and international athletes. from various sports, and I've got a resource called as mymentalcoach.in. On the website, they can get directly in touch with me. I've also got a digital mental training program, one of its kind, where players can directly log in for a very small fee, log into all the mental areas that they can start working on to slowly integrate this mental aspect into the game. Plus, another interesting thing is that I also got a completely online mindset assessment and a reporting system for athletes, specifically for athletes, where they can get a 23-page report on the various 6 factors that affect their game and how they can start applying it in their game. So I'm trying to build this digital platform where players can start accessing this, because I think so it's important that not only the pyramid gets value out of mental training, but I think so the entire ecosystem starts using mental training as one of the tools that by which they build the game, along with the technical and the physical aspects of the game.
Yeah, as I said, all the links in the description below of this video. But for now, let's just dive into the chat specifically. And just as a general overview, what does mental conditioning actually mean?
Yeah, and that's a great question to start with, Neel, because I think so there's so many myths and prejudices about the mental area of the game. And for me, I do not look at this mental conditioning from a counseling perspective. And I think so that's one very important perspective that needs to change. For me, one of my quotes that I put across with athletes is that you need to train your mind the way you train your body. Right? And that's the attitudinal change that first athletes needs to have about how they're looking at their mind. Because we can say that sports is a 90% mental game and it's so important, but unless you actually start working on it, applying, understanding your mind more, and then start understanding which are the areas I want to improve on, you're not going to improve. You'll keep talking about how important it is, but you won't. And that's why mental training is what, in a way, conditioning is all about. So just as you physically condition your body to an optimum level, you need to mentally condition your body to an optimal level by improving those areas that you want to work on and maintain those areas that you are already strong at. And when this happens, when this perspective change happens, is when players are proactively going to then start looking at their mind and saying, yeah, I want to get trained myself on my mind at the right age and time. I don't want to keep it too late, or else later on it becomes a problem. And that's a big problem in athletes, where they push the mental area of work to a very later stage. And that's where the problem is. And I'm sure you would like to ask a couple of questions if you want on this.
Yeah, is the mentality of a cricketer heavily linked to the current environment that they're in, i.e. the support staff within their team, the players that they play with?
Yes, I have to say that a team game is essentially is different from an individual game, and therefore you are going to have that peer pressure. You are going to get pulled in different direction by how other players, the seniors, how they are working, how they are doing things, how are the juniors, how is that player perceiving himself or his role in the team, how is his connect with the coaches. All of these all of these are big factors that affect the player's mindset. So when we are talking about the mental conditioning, it's not only from a sport or a sport specific point of view, like, how do I keep my mind calm under pressure? Of course, those are important areas, but we're also looking at the mental part from a broader team dynamic point of view, on how you can still be your own in spite of all these different pulls and areas of challenge that is naturally going to happen when you're going to get into teams.
I've heard a lot of players say that the key is to focus on the process, not the actual result. Do you buy into that?
I, of course, buy into that, but I also feel that for most of us, most of the players, or most of us rather, I would not want to single out players, even the coaches, when they say, okay, focus on the process, I don't think so the player is able to understand what does that process actually mean. So it's fine to say focus on the process, but what does it mean? Where do I focus on? What is my process? So for example, if a bowler is standing and he has to deliver an Yorker, and a bowler can bowl a yorker, it can be overpitched, or it can get full toss, he can get hit for a six. Now, these are things that are happening in his mind. Now, at that time, he has to focus on his process. But what does that actually mean? What part of the process is the question. And I think so, therefore, as you go up the ladder, it is the specificity of the process and understanding what is my process that's actually working for me. This identification is then going to lead me to focusing on that process. But if I'm not able to identify what that process is, if it becomes abstract in my mind, at that time under pressure is going to become even more diluted and abstract. And that is exactly the reason why players are unable to focus on the process when it matters under pressure.
You mentioned pressure a few times. What is your biggest advice to a player that perhaps does struggle with it? Not only at the highest level, but say in the amateur game on a weekend, say if a youngster's been given the last ball, a last over of an innings, and he feels those nerves, what advice would you give them?
See, one of my advice would be for them to embrace that pressure. Because you can never play competition without pressure. I want to play without pressure is a utopian thought that can never happen. If you want to play without pressure, go and play a recreational game or, play in your lane or whatever. But if you want to play competitive cricket, you are going to feel pressure. Pressure is part and parcel of the game. The mind and the body are connected to one another, and your mind is going to feel your emotions and thoughts and visuals and all that stuff. And that's the beauty finally of the game. That's exactly why we are playing on the game. In a way, it's an opportunity for you to find out wow, this is a great opportunity for me to express myself under this pressure. So when you look at that situation, that challenge as an opportunity, and then you embrace that pressure, then you no longer feel the problem centered towards the pressure. You start looking at solutioning of that pressure. So how can I control my thoughts? How can I control my emotions? What can I do to myself? But if I feel, oh my God, I'm feeling pressure, what should I do? I think so players need to first change this attitude about pressure, saying pressure is part and parcel. Let me embrace it. It's an opportunity for me to express my skills.
If for someone that perhaps doesn't know how to control their emotion, control pressure, etc., is there, and we specifically to cricket, are there any exercises, mental exercises that you would recommend? Visualization, breathing exercises? What would you recommend a cricket player to do when faced with scenarios that they're struggling to cope with?
That's a great question, Neel, and this is a question that I asked many times. And before I dive into exactly what are the strategies, I'd like to give you a principle of this. For example, when Sehwag came into the picture, and Sehwag started batting with Tendulkar, then it was like everybody used to say, Sehwag bats so much like Tendulkar. His cover drive is so similar. That time the commentators used to say. But now when we look deeper and when we know Sehwag, we know, my God, there's such a big difference between the cover drive of Tendulkar versus a Sehwag. So the principle of the cover drive would be the same, but what works for Sehwag would not work for Tendulkar and vice versa. Similarly, over here, every mind is different. Every mind, because of genetics, personality, socioeconomic experiences, parental upbringing, all this make a player, right? And therefore, what works for one player is not going to work for another player. And that is exactly the reason why tips, simple quick fixes, okay, start visualization, do self-talk is not going to work. It is a combination of how your mind is and what works for you is the critical part. Now, within that, as a principle, what are the various things that you can do? Yes, and this is where, as a part of my training, which I work with international or national athletes, is there is a program which I have by which a player starts first being aware of the mind, aware of his challenges, aware of what are the things that he's already doing well, and then what are the things that we need to add to it to improve his pressure controlling strategies. So that addition might be a visualization strategy, it might be a self-talk strategy, it might be a focusing on process kind of a strategy, it might be breathing. There's so many different types of what you can do to calm yourself, right? Different breathing techniques, different kind of cues that we create. And therefore, a lot of my work also at the elite level, when I've got individual athletes whom I work with, it happens on court, where I work with a player actually on the court or on the grass or in the nets. because then the player knows that, okay, this is what works for me, that helps me to keep my mind calm under pressure or to be clear in the moment of time and all those things. So if you now realize that training, when we talk about mental training now, therefore, we know that it's going to require time, it's going to require practice, it's going to require a continuous repetition of those strategies for you to make it subconscious or a habit making thing that you can apply under pressure.
Again, you mentioned a buzzword there, habit. How important is it from a mental perspective for training to replicate a match situation?
Yes, very important, I would say, very, very important. But I would also let you know that it's so difficult for players to recreate a match situation. You know, it's very difficult to recreate, because when you are saying recreating a match situation, are you talking about the situation per se? In a way, you're not talking about the situation. It's not about you have to hit you have to hit 20 runs in 7 balls. That's not a match situation. The match situation is you have to hit 20 runs in 7 balls when you are in the maybe the second, you are chasing and it's an important match. It's the last match of your league tournament and you've got boys who are backing you up. You have not done well in the last 2 matches. Now you have to perform. Now, is that a different connotation? Yes, it's a completely different connotation, because now the emotional juices are going to be completely different than what you would be just if you're looking at it as an isolated situation of saying 20 runs, 7 balls. And I think so it's very difficult for our mind to be dragged into that match situation. And therefore, one of my areas of work is to actually recreate that for players so that they actually feel that match situation. They feel their heart beating faster. They feel that sweat. They feel their mind is going topsy-turvy. They feel becoming uncomfortable. And it is what you can do when you're being uncomfortable is what is finally going to differentiate between good and great.
What advice would you give to a cricketer, whatever level they're playing at, about external pressure? So not what's going through their mind in terms of results, i.e., their own inward goals in terms of getting a 50, for example, on the weekend, but external pressure. Say a youngster, pressure from parents, or at the elite level, pressure from external commentators, the crowd. What advice would you give on that aspect from the mindset perspective, the external pressures a player would face?
Yeah. Players do face a lot of external pressures, and I think so it slowly grows on them. So they don't actually realize, oh, this is actually affecting me more than I thought it would affect. And the basic advice is to know that if it's an uncontrollable, you cannot do anything about it. And finally, as a cricketer, it's for you to accept the pleasant as well as the unpleasant experiences that are going to come your way in your career. That's going to make you look back at your career in a very satisfying way. And therefore, if you look at this from a aspect saying, yeah, these are uncontrollables, these are things and people are going to talk about me and they are going to, shoo me off, or they want to write bad stuff about me or getting trolled. And that's part and parcel of today's game. But I've got an opportunity to prove all my critics wrong by focusing on what I can do, focusing on my skills, being in the game. And if I do that, I will come out a winner. And that's the advice I would give this cricketers.
How do you help cricketers build their confidence up?
I wish there was a magic wand for me to do that. When we talk about confidence, what are we really talking about? I think so that is an area that we need to first understand. What is confidence? Confidence is finally something that I feel either control about or not control about, isn't it? Confidence is control. That sense of control, that feeling of, that is exactly the reason why players play in a particular way the day before the match. Either they'll hit shots, they will leave the ball, or they've got their own way of preparation because they want to feel that sense of control. And it's all for you to build that confidence. It's all about repeating those routines that you build into your system in a manner by which okay, I am ready. That feeling of readiness within you is what's going to make you feel confident. But that feeling of readiness is going to come from the routines that you have created, and it's not only a routine related to your cricketing game, but it's also the routine that is in diet, in what time you're sleeping, and when you keep the phone away, and what time you get up, and how do you go about building your emotional quotient when it comes to getting into that match? What are your thoughts? All of this become a part of your routine, which helps you to prepare optimally to get you the confidence when you go on the field.
Is mental toughness something that can be taught, or is it inherent in the individual?
Yes, so I think so that every player, every person is mentally tough. It's all about accessing that mental toughness and times under pressure. And my job is to make the player understand his mental toughness touch points in a way and add to it which is already got, so that then it becomes even more stronger under pressure.
Well, it is a fascinating subject. It's great to cover it in this chat. Just to end on, if a youngster, came to you struggling in this aspect, the mindset aspect of things, what's the best piece of advice that you'd give them, just to end on?
The best piece of advice I would give to them is that it's never too late to start mental training. Start working with me today.
Swaroop, perfect. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and all the best for the months ahead. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Neel. Thanks for having me here, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
So Neel Khagram, Cricket Life Stories, Dr. Swaroop Savanur, thank you.